Most people feel silence because they're afraid of it. That fear costs them everything: trust, influence, attraction, respect. But there's one conversation technique that the most charismatic people in the world use unconsciously. It's so simple that nobody notices it. And when you notice it, everything about how people respond to you changes. It's not what you say, it's what you don't say. Right now, there are conversations happening all around you where one person is dominating with words, and another person is winning with silence. The person winning isn't talking more, they're listening deeper. And their silence is doing the work that most people try to accomplish with 1,000 words. Here's what most people don't realize. In conversation, we operate on an invisible rhythm. Someone speaks, you feel pressure to respond immediately. So you do. You fill the gap. You interrupt the silence. And in that moment, you've just handed control of the conversation to yourself, which sounds good until you realize something. The person who speaks the most is rarely the person who has the most influence. The silent technique works because of how your brain processes communication. When you speak, people are busy formulating their response while you're still talking. They're not really listening.
They're waiting.
But when you pause, when you let silence exist, something shifts in the listener's mind. The pause creates what psychologists call a cognitive vacuum. Your brain hates empty space, so it fills it. And in that filling, the listener becomes an active participant in the conversation instead of a passive receiver. Think about the last conversation that actually moved you. It wasn't the person who talked the most. It was probably someone who asked you a question, then actually waited for your answer. They didn't interrupt. They didn't jump in with their own story. They sat with the silence. And in that silence, you felt heard. That's the technique. It has a name in psychology: active listening with strategic pauses. But most people know it by a different name. They just call it being genuinely interested in someone else. When you pause after asking a question, you're not just waiting for words. You're signaling to the other person that their thoughts matter, that their answer is worth your time, that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk. This creates something called the reciprocity effect. When someone feels truly heard, their brain releases oxytocin, a neurotransmitter associated with trust and bonding. But here's the key: they only feel heard if you actually give them space to think. If you fill every silence with more words, they never feel that safety. They feel rushed. They feel like you're performing rather than connecting. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. You're on a first date. The other person tells you about their job. Most people respond immediately with, "Oh, that's cool. I do this," and suddenly the conversation is about you. But someone using the silent technique responds differently. They ask a follow-up question, and then, this is crucial, they stop talking. They wait. The other person keeps talking, goes deeper, reveals more vulnerability. By the end of the date, they walk away feeling like this person really knows them. They don't remember much of what that person said, but they remember how that person made them feel. Or you're in a work meeting. Your boss asks for ideas. Everyone jumps in immediately with half-formed thoughts. But one person pauses. They actually think. When they finally speak, it's thoughtful. It's considered, and suddenly everyone listens. That person's silence gave their eventual words weight. The pause became a kind of authority. This effect is so powerful that it extends into how people perceive your competence. In one study, researchers found that when people took time to think before responding, others rated them as smarter, more trustworthy, and more confident, even when the actual content of their answer was identical to someone who responded immediately. That's the silent technique. It's not complicated. But most people never use it because they mistake silence for awkwardness. They think they have to fill the space. They confuse being liked with being heard. They don't understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a conversation is absolutely nothing. The silence does the work. Now, here's how you actually implement this. First, ask better questions. This is the foundation. A mediocre question with silence beats a great statement without it. When you ask something genuine, something you actually want to know, pause and wait for the answer. Don't interrupt. Don't formulate your response while they're talking. Second, become comfortable with pauses. I mean, genuinely comfortable. Most people feel 2 to 3 seconds of silence and panic, but real conversation needs breathing room. Let your pauses last. 3 seconds, 4 seconds. It feels longer than it is. But that's exactly why it works. Third, reflect back what you hear. When someone shares something with you, pause, then say what you heard in your own words. So what I'm hearing is, this accomplishes 2 things. It proves you were actually listening, not just waiting. And it gives the other person space to clarify, to go deeper, to feel understood. Fourth, use silence when you're upset. This is counterintuitive. When someone says something that bothers you, most people respond immediately. They defend, they attack, they explain. But if you pause, if you let them sit with their own words, something happens. They often second-guess themselves. They often apologize without you saying anything. The silence forces them to reflect. Fifth, embrace pauses in your own speech. This isn't just about listening. It's about how you present yourself. When you speak, pause between ideas. Let people digest what you said before moving to the next thought. It makes you sound more confident, more intelligent, more intentional. Silence is underrated as a tool of power. The people who transform conversations aren't the people with the most words. They're the people with the most awareness of what words actually mean and how they land. They understand that every silence is an opportunity for connection. Every pause is a chance for someone else to feel genuinely seen. And when you master this, something remarkable happens. People start seeking you out. They want to talk to you. They remember conversations with you differently than conversations with anyone else. Not because you were brilliant or funny or charming, but because for once in their life, someone let them be fully heard. The silent technique that changes conversations isn't silent at all. It's one of the loudest things you can do. It's just that it doesn't use words.